The next thing I want to talk about is Elon Musk and Twitter preparing for court, which is quite interesting because Elon Musk is a self-stated free speech absolutist, as he's putting it, and free speech is something very important to you, very important to people like myself as well. I believe that society should have, standards for discourse and such, but I don't necessarily trust a government, a state, to be able to implement those standards. And, you've been cancelled. I also have been cancelled quite recently. Sadly, I don't want to go any further into it there. But before I go any further, just check out this recent hangout that Carl did again with Josh, talking about the despicable let me just try that again. Despicable, debauched degeneracy of Hunter Biden, because, I thought this was relevant mainly because Twitter, who are the centerpiece of this whole Elon Musk fiasco, are one of the main culprits of trying to cover up the Hunter Biden laptop story. And there's been quite a lot of leaks regarding this, and even more come out recently, which is what Carl and Josh go over in this video. And some of it's quite nasty. Some of it's not very nice, so check that out if you're interested. So yeah, free speech is something that's on the tip of everybody's tongues nowadays, and not always in the most positive light. For instance, we've got this article, this very recent one from The Guardian, talking about, do you want free speech to thrive? Then it has to be regulated, now more than ever. And that's very interesting because my immediate question to this is, well, who gets to regulate it?
Can't regulate free speech because then it's not free speech.
Well, yeah, who gets to regulate speech? Yeah. Why do they want to regulate speech? I found out something interesting a while back. Obviously, the Constitution of the United States of America, the First Amendment, Congress shall make no law impeding on the freedom of speech. I found out that I think it was John Jay, one of the writers of one of the Federalists, argued for days over the use of one word in that amendment, and that word was for the freedom of speech, because he wanted to make it clear the freedom of speech is something that exists outside of the purview of the state. It's something that exists outside of the reach of the law. At the end of the day, you as a human being have the right to speak your mind, and we can't touch that. But then these people go ahead and go, it has to be regulated. Now, I don't think necessarily that schools should be having conversations with small children about transgenderism or any form of gender ideology or critical race theory, for instance, and that does not impede on my own belief in freedom of speech, because these people are state employees. They're working in a public or private, if you're in a private school, capacity to raise other people's children. You have a duty of care. But this guy is basically just... It's a really confusing article. It waffles around the topic for a while, talking about after the stabbing of Salman Rushdie that happened recently, because the fatwa was still active against him, and somebody got hold of him and stabbed him, I think, 15 times, when it's been, almost 40 years, something like that, since the Satanic Verses came out. And then the article ends like this. This is the debate now thundering into review. The correct response to the Rushdie outrage is not to plead for freedom of speech, but to ask what it really means and how it is to be sustained and regulated. This is not done through silence. I don't understand what this means, other than just overall coming out and saying we need to regulate freedom of speech, in which case he doesn't answer in any of this. I suppose it would probably be a bit more implicit to say, like, well, regulate the speech that I don't like, keep the speech that I do like. It's kind of a nothing statement.
His real emphasis on this really is, I know better than everybody else. So we all want free speech, and I want free speech, but yous all can't be trusted with it. So therefore, someone like me needs to regulate your free speech, because you're all morons. We've tested you before, and you all voted for Brexit, and we've tested you before, and you've done other things we didn't like. So you can't be trusted with free speech. Therefore, it needs to be regulated. Now, I understand there can't be total free speech. I can't say to you, I'd like you to go get a knife and stab that guy, because that's incitement. So it's still free speech, but we have laws. So I don't like the word regulated, because regulated means bureaucrats. It means non-elected bureaucrats telling you what you can and can't do. What we do and what we have in this country are laws. So we have free speech. We can say and do whatever we want up to that point, because when you cross that point, you've now broken a law. Those laws are initiated in a democratic country by elected politicians, If we don't like those laws, we can change those politicians and get new ones who will change that law. So that's the only caveat I would have for free speech would be it can't be completely the Wild West, but it has to be done through legislation that the population can change if they disagree with it.
While I agree with all of those checks, sadly, I think the past few decades have shown that it hasn't worked that way.
No.
While it should work that way, it certainly hasn't worked that way for a very long time. Every new piece of legislation that's been put in that does regulate speech in the way that this man wants to has been to criminalize offensive speech, to criminalize speech that, 10 years ago would have been considered perfectly rational, to the point where people like yourself and I are getting chucked out and potentially even persecuted purely for stating facts of biological reality or pushing back against political ideologies that they don't like. Every single piece of legislation has only moved to push the state of our culture further into a leftist paradigm.
Because we have no real Englishmen left. They've been cuckolded.
Certainly none in government.
Yeah.
That's for absolute sure. Boris
An Englishman
Johnson
would be saying, you don't tell me what I can say in my house. My house is my castle. Don't tell me where I can go and what I can't do. What are these? And that's what an Englishman would have done. That's when we had the Peterloo massacre in Manchester, because the local people there were saying, we've elected our MPs to represent us, but the laws won't let them vote on the importation of cheap wheat. So they had a march and then got charged by soldiers, 18 people died. But they said, we're not having this. But because we've allowed all this to happen, we've allowed it to happen because governments have had no pushback off anybody. So we'll do that. Oh, no one's noticed, no one cares. We'll do a bit more. No one noticed, no one cared. And you can also look at, same thing with the grooming gangs. Oh, we raped 1,000 girls. Oh, no one seemed to care.
Police will just turn a blind eye.
Rape another 1,000. No one seems to care. And it's, where is the outrage? Where are the Englishmen going? No, we're not having this. This is our country.
Well, certainly in terms of the grooming gang things, there has been outrage from certain particular people who have been almost completely proscribed from public discussion and social media, to the point where, Callum and I refer to him as Romy Tomlinson, for instance, but he has been completely ostracized, been branded all sorts of horrible names, censored to, beyond censored at this point, where the man couldn't even open a bank account. So that's sadly what happens to Englishmen nowadays.
So that's one example. But then if we look at the young people in Harrods the other day, opening up all the bottles of milk and pouring it on the floor, because we shouldn't be milking cows because it's some sort of torture.
God.
Where were they when the girls are being raped? When we've got Insulate Britain on the roads gluing themselves to the roads or gluing themselves to masterpieces in museums, they weren't gluing themselves to stop girls being raped. It's only when it's a trendy cause, then it's something to talk about, because I will get some value. I'll get some brownie points out of this.
It's not just that it's a trendy cause, it's their trendy abstract causes. I'm fighting against climate change. Who can, it's not like I can point at climate change and say that's a bad thing. You have to point to all these abstract metrics. We've got the science to listen to. When it's like, oh, these cows are tortured, I can't ask a cow how it feels about this particular situation it's in. Could be perfectly happy, but at the end of the day, it's a cow. I'm a human being. Sorry, that gives me dominance over that. So as long as I'm not being maliciously cruel, I can kind of do what I want.
And a cow in the wild, not the cows we have now, but what cows used to look like 1,000 years ago, in the wild would have the throats ripped out by lions. So nature's cruel.
Nature is absolutely cruel. If anything, we're a lot less cruel than the old force of Mother Nature. But all of a sudden, when you put the grooming gangs into effect, that's not abstract. That's very concrete. There are faces we can put to these people. They are real human beings. Well, if you want to call them human beings after everything they've done. But you have to face up to them. You have to potentially be willing to get into some kind of physical confrontation with them. And you're also going to be decried by the mainstream media as being some kind of Islamophobe or racist or xenophobe or something, which most of these people, if Insulate Britain or Just Stop Oil, if they go out and do some kind of stupid protest, they're going to get people like us complaining about it and saying that it's a bad thing. But The Guardian, BBC, they're going to be giving him a big round of applause. Congratulations.
And the judges.
And the judges
you
as
just
well.
send them back out onto the streets because you had a right to protest, and it is very serious what you're doing.
Sorry, you destroyed the Colston statue. Well, congratulations. You're just holding us accountable for our evil history. Absolutely ridiculous.
And the reason why it happens is because they know there'll be no outrage. Government spent a fortune getting rid of plastic straws. Government spent a fortune protecting African elephants. Do you know that our army are in Africa on the reserves, training the gamekeepers to how to fight poachers? British Army soldier was killed a couple of years ago, shot in the head by a poacher. So we're doing those things. Do you know why? Because the British public tell our politicians we care. So if we tell them what we care about, they will do what we want them to do. It's just that we're so beaten and we're so pathetic and weak that most people just keep their mouths shut. And it's our fault. When you live in a democracy, you get the government you deserve. And this is what we deserve because we voted them all in over time and time and time again. And we all need to take some personal responsibility and say, this is our fault. It's too easy going, it's their fault. Because that takes and removes the blame from you. We live in a democracy, it's our fault.
Well, I would say this next little thing that I've got here may point not necessarily to it be all the English people's fault, although obviously there's a definite share of the blame here, but more I would say the interests of special interest groups affecting corporations and politicians especially, because I got this interesting one which someone sent to me about censorship, where it was a YouGov poll asking what should happen to old movies and TV shows that contain racist, sexist or homophobic content. Me, personally, I would say nothing. Just leave them unedited. Who cares? If the content isn't for you, you don't have to watch it. Nobody's forcing this stuff on you. Not in the same way that, say, for instance, woke agendas are being forced in every mainstream film nowadays, apart from maybe one or two off to the side. But one very interesting thing, if you scroll down to the graphics they've got here, you can see they've compared the responses from Britons to BAME individuals. And as you can see there, apart from two choices, Britons overall seem to be much less eager to censor these sorts of old programs and other such things. So only 10% of Britons said that they shouldn't be available at all, as opposed to 27% of BAME. 6% said they should only be available if their content is removed, whereas BAME were 13%. The only ones where we got a higher percentage was should be available unedited and without a warning label about the content, which is 12%, which I would have hoped to have been much higher, but okay. And the only other one was should be available unedited, but proceeded with a warning about the content, got 60%. And, you know, that shows to me that the English are still trying to be fair and still trying to, you know, give ground, but I think that giving that ground over just allows more room for people who want to advocate for this sort of censorship.
I think of a whole different reason why this could be like this. And a simple reason that many of the Britons remember Alf Garnett and watched Alf Garnett and found it funny, or Love Thy Neighbour. Many of the Black, Asian, ethnic minorities weren't even in the country. So if they're being asked the question, do you think we should show this old programme that's racist and homophobic? What a leading question that is. So the answer is, of course, it's going to be, no, you shouldn't be showing that. But the British people are going, oh, I remember Dad's Army. I remember it ain't half hot mum.
So, supposedly, it's Blackadder as well that they're going to be putting some warnings ahead of.
All depends on how you ask the question. If these people have never heard of these programmes, why would they want a homophobic, racist program?
That's an excellent point, actually. I hadn't considered that they probably are asking, I mean, it is YouGov, so they're definitely asking leading questions.
Are they, right? I don't even know. I've heard of YouGov. I have no idea
YouGov
their slant of anything.
They're very slimy. I believe that if you've shown yourself to answer in one very particular direction, perhaps a more conservative direction, they're less likely to email you for potential future surveys. So
all depends who's funding them. You know, I've done quite a bit of reading on these sort of things where when you hire someone, not just YouGov, but other examples, you're hiring them because you want an outcome. You know what you want them to prove. And as a good business, they'll go out and get you what you want. So it's not fraud, but they will twist it and ask the questions and to get what you want because you're paying my wages. Of course they're going to do that. I would do that. That's why I don't trust many of these things.
Most of these YouGov polls do. There was a run of them where they all had I think it was 71% in favour of obviously what the government wanted to be in favour of, and it was very suspicious, one after the other. They all came out 71% say, 71% say, 71% say. So it is very good to sort of cast a suspicious eye on these sorts of surveys. But carrying on onto Twitter, this was an article that Connor sent to me by Alex Berenson from his Substack, where he's talking about how the White House had privately demanded Twitter to ban him months before the company did so. Now, Berenson was involved in a lawsuit with Twitter, which he won, where he was able to get a load of access as part of that to, I think it's a messaging app called Slack messages, where he was able to see the sorts of discussions that Twitter employees were having regarding him. And he goes on to explain in detail how these messages showed that the US government had been in touch with Twitter employees and made it very clear that because of Berenson's views, his questioning of the steps taken to combat COVID, shall we say, and the efficacy of certain things, meant that they couldn't have him on there. And they were asking very pointedly, why is he still on your platform? Why are you allowing to send him to send all of this information? And it shows that these companies have become just another branch of the state. In America, you're protected by the First Amendment, but this does not apply to private companies. Private companies, you can be discriminatory over the sorts of content you want on your site. But it doesn't really apply when the government is actively strong-arming you into censoring certain people on your site. That shows that, especially when you're willingly going along with it, you've just become another branch of the government right now. And that is something that Elon Musk seemingly has been trying to repair, trying to fix. After, obviously, earlier this year, what he was talking about was potentially buying Twitter. There was a big thing about whether he was actually going to or not. And then he put the application forward to buy it, I think with $44 billion to get a majority stockholder, which was immediately met by resistance by Vanguard, I think it was, immediately trying to outbuy him on the amount of stocks that he owned before it just became an outright takeover bid. But that has changed recently. Again, it's been an ever-evolving situation when he decided he didn't want to buy it anymore because he thought that Twitter was committing fraud by keeping information secret about the true extent of spam accounts on there, where the fake accounts were a little bit suspicious to Elon, but now, due to court action, because Twitter was like, actually, no, you do have to buy us, even though you don't want to anymore, and we might have to dob ourselves in for fraud through this action. Twitter is now needing to give Elon Musk documents from a former Twitter executive who said Musk was a key figure in calculating the amount of fake accounts on the platform, according to a Monday court order. Bot and spam accounts on Twitter have become a central issue in the legal fight over whether Musk, who's Tesla's chief executive, must complete his $44 billion acquisition of the social media company. He accused them earlier this month of fraud for misrepresenting the number of real active users on its platform, which Twitter denied. The company has accused him of breaching his agreement to acquire the company and wants McCormick to order him to complete the deal at $54.20 a share. And I got this next bit from a separate article, so sorry if you can't find it in here. So Musk could be on solid legal ground to pull off the deal if Twitter had attempted to defraud him during the takeover process. Lawyers for Twitter and Musk have issued a flurry of subpoenas to banks, investors, and attorneys involved in the deal as the two sides prepare for an October 17th trial in Wilmington. Twitter claims that Musk is using the concerns about spam and bot accounts as an excuse to get out of the transaction, whereas he's saying they failed to show the spam bots account for fewer than 5% of its active users, as it is said in regulatory findings. And the interesting thing about this is one of the ways that it could be important that Twitter has so many spam users would be, what are those spam users doing? What are those fake accounts doing? They might be actively targeting people with the wrong opinions for some ulterior motives. They could be used for any reason that could be very damaging to look at. But there is something I also wanted to point out here, which is that Elon Musk, despite being a free speech absolutist, does potentially, well, no, not potentially, he does have some strange connections with China, where he writes articles for the Chinese Censorship Bureau's magazine, which is China Cyberspace, and is very very quick and eager to praise China for the sorts of things that he does, that they do as a country, including the state of their economy, which how he can have anything positive to say on the state of their economy, I don't understand. But he's also said that, he wants to push for a brighter, cleaner future with all the green energy. And he said specifically Chinese companies will be a force to be reckoned with in the case of energy innovation. This could all be because he is trying very hard to maintain a good business relationship with China because
he's a businessman.
Well, yeah, he does.
He's not a politician.
He sells lots of Teslas over there. But at the same time, while I understand from a business perspective, I do think the eagerness to capitulate to China could be a bit compromising for him personally. But before I move on, I just wanted to point out as well, we do have at 3 o'clock, obviously this will be mainly for those who are watching live. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll be able to find this on the website later once the video's gone out. At 3 o'clock, we'll be showing a video, we'll be posting a video to the website where it's an interview with Jason Miller, the CEO of Getter, with Carl talking about Getter, talking about Twitter, and talking about Elon's takeover, attempted takeover of Twitter. So if you're interested in that, check it out.
If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast of Lotus Eaters, you can go over to lotuseaters.com to get all the premium content on our website, such as John Wheatley and I are discussing the politics and philosophy of Studio Ghibli. I promise I'm not a weeb. If you'd like to follow the rest of the content I'm putting out, you can go over to Getter and follow me at @con_Tomlinson. Thank you and goodbye.